All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich, here with the not quite 100% Bob Rose tonight. Bob, I know you're not doing that well, but I appreciate you toughing it out for a little bit. Bob is doing this show on drugs tonight, ladies and gentlemen. He's a little under the weather. So, free agency has started. Well, the tampering period, because the actual free agency date starts tomorrow. But the Saints have made some moves, but also took a lot of hits. Yesterday, Saints Twitter was panicking over losing 4 defensive starters, especially 3 to division rivals. How do you make of this? Because I've got some ideas too.
I'll tell you, it's not that big a surprise. It is a little bit surprising. They all except Davenport went to division rivals. That made me chuckle a little bit. But yeah, listen, they weren't going to re-sign Davenport. Caden Ellis said something in an interview less than a month ago that made me believe that he was going to look for somewhere else. The quote in an interview, to nutshell it, he was asked about free agency, and he said very clearly that playing time and playing scheme was more important to him than money. And if you read between the lines, that's him saying that he wanted to go somewhere where he was going to play more. And as long as Demario Davis and Pete Werner are both healthy, Caden Ellis was not going to get a lot of snaps in the Saints defensive scheme, a scheme that normally uses 2 linebackers with an extra defensive back. Ellis had his breakout season mainly because of the injury to Pete Werner. And remember that. Onyemata is the one that I think stings, because the Saints were going to pay him almost $10 million this year, whether he played for them or not. And the fact that he got, if you're going to break it down in yearly annual salary average, he got about that much from the Atlanta Falcons. That's what stings, is because maybe the Saints could have re-signed him for that same amount of money and not lost him that way. So that angers me a little bit. Tuttle got overpaid by the Carolina Panthers for a nice defensive player, but one that's very limited in a rotation. And folks, we knew that the defensive tackle position was in need of a serious upgrade for the New Orleans Saints coming into this offseason. So while it really hurts when you look at this current depth chart and see literally no defensive tackles under contract, you knew that they were going to address this position both in free agency and the draft, probably multiple picks. So none of this should come as a surprise to none of that portion of free agency should come as a surprise to anybody.
Yeah, our sister podcast, the Carolina Cat Chronicles, reached out to me. Tony reached out to me and asked me, give me a thumbnail sketch of Tuttle.
Same here.
What kind of player do you think he is? And I said basically what you said. I said, listen, he's a good player. He's a good run stuffer, but he's really a wave player, a rotational player. The longer he's out there, the more limitations you see with him. He's not a good pass rusher. He gets tired, and then he gets sloppy, and he gets stood up, and you can start running the ball on him. So you need to rotate him a lot. But I said, he is forever a Saints hero because of the stiff arm of Matt Ryan. And I said, that's what people are going to remember most about him. And that's what they really miss about him. And I sent him a clip with the German play call, because I said, this is the way you have to watch this play. And he loved it. He really did. But yeah, all these guys, even I'm going to throw Lotta in the mix. All these guys, not draft. It was 4 draft college in Canada. He didn't even start playing football until he got to that level. Of course, my internet's going to start getting jumpy now. But yeah, Ellis was a 7th round draft pick. So we're talking about good players. We're not talking about elite, irreplaceable players who got paid a ton of money because the Saints didn't have the money to pay them. We didn't lose an Alvin Kamara. We didn't lose a Ryan Ramczyk. We didn't lose an all-pro, even Demario Davis. We're not losing that caliber of a player. It hurts because you've lost 4 starters, but they're not the kind of guys where you're going to say, oh my God, how can we fill this hole? It's just at this point right now, you're like, well, we don't have enough players to start a game right now, but we're not playing a game right now. That you've got the draft. You've got more undrafted free agents who are going to come in. I mean, just like you can get another Shy Tuttle in free agency,
easily.
Undrafted free agency. You can get another Shy Tuttle. Malcolm Roach, my understanding is he wants to test the market too, because sure, he's looking around going, Tuttle's getting paid like this. They're paying these defensive tackles through the nose. Hell yeah, I want some of that because I know what the Saints are going to pay me, which kind of segues into the next thing that we have. So we lost those 4 guys. We had to get under the cap. And part of the way we got under the cap, we've restructured and put Michael Thomas essentially on a 1-year deal, a prove-it deal, an incentive-laden deal for those of you who are like, man, this dude's always hurt. He can't, he's not going to play. He'll get hurt again this year. Well, you know what? Then he doesn't get any money. This is all on him.
Yeah.
He wanted He wanted Derek Carr. I've been listening to Saints Happy Hour podcast before I jumped on this show. He wanted Derek Carr to come here. He was part of the group recruiting him along with Cam Jordan. He's excited to play with Derek Carr. So, yeah, the onus is all on him. Prove it. Prove you can stay healthy. Prove that you're still an impact receiver. Prove you're going to do what you say you're going to do. This is a great deal for him. Likewise, they told Jameis Winston, hey, either accept this renegotiated deal or we're going to cut you, even though we're going to eat a good portion of your salary. We're willing to cut you. And Winston accepted it because Winston looked around the market. And this is unbelievable, too. If you look at these other contracts, which I want to ask you about in a minute, but, Winston says, yeah, I'll go ahead and take the $4 million with another 4 in incentives if I get playing time and things like that, but I'll be the backup for $4 million. And it reduced money on the cap for them, too. They restructured Kamara. They restructured Lattimore. They restructured one other person too. Cam. So they're now cap compliant. In fact, they're under the cap now. How do you read these moves the Saints made to keep Thomas and Winston? And why do you think Winston took that money?
And I'll tell you what, let's start with Winston. I got to admit, I was a little bit surprised to see him stay a New Orleans Saint. But the reason that I was surprised was on Winston's behalf, not the fact that the Saints moved, on the Saints' behalf, not the fact that Winston agreed to the reworked contract. It was very clear to all of us last year, anybody with a working brain anyway, that Jameis Winston was not Dennis Allen's guy. Yeah, and yeah, you can read that into, Jameis didn't get a 100% fair shake. Yeah, you call it that if you want, but the bottom line is he wasn't the type of quarterback that the head coach wanted. Yeah, that was very clear over the second half of the year when we heard Winston was medically cleared to play, but Allen stayed with Dalton. Dalton, now a free agent, well, no longer a free agent. Dalton is now a Carolina Panther. Who signed a 2-year, $10 million deal with $8 million guaranteed. Remember that number for a second, folks. And then, like you pointed out, the Saints doubled back to Winston and said, "Look, this is the number that we have in mind for you to come back. If you accept it, great. You're a Saint for 1 year. If you don't, feel free to test the open market." And then, like you said, Winston and his representatives, they had to look around and see no realistic opportunities for him this year. So he bet on himself. But make no mistake, folks, this is not a quarterback controversy. This is not a quarterback competition. Mm-hmm. Derek Carr is the New Orleans Saints starter. The Saints were always, and I mean always, going to bring in a backup to Carr that had not only A, veteran starting experience, and B, preferably one with knowledge of the Saints system. Jameis Winston checks off both of those boxes. He's a hard worker. He's well loved and well respected by the majority of that locker room. So it was a no-brainer when you look at it from that angle. And then you look at the fact that Winston basically agreed to a $4 million deal that could reach $8 million with incentives. Incentives means that Carr gets hurt and Winston not only plays, but plays well. So that's a win-win for the Saints as well as Jameis Winston. Not only that, but they're paying Winston less than what Andy Dalton is getting paid. They're paying Winston less than what Sam Darnold is getting paid. And folks, do you mean to tell me that you'd rather? And I'm going to leave Andy Dalton out of this because I know, I know it's going to be split right down the middle. But who would you rather have as your backup to Derek Carr if something were to happen? Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, an 87-year-old Matt Ryan, Sam Darnold, or Jameis Winston? The answer is pretty clear. So I think Winston made the smart decision for him, and I think the Saints made the smart decision for the logical decision for them. Speaking of logic, Michael Thomas. There was no way on God's green earth that Michael Thomas was going to play for the New Orleans Saints on a $31 million deal, which is exactly what would have happened had that contract stayed the way it stayed as is by this Friday, March 17th. So again, the Saints and Michael Thomas's representatives sat down. First of all, I don't think they would have sat down if Derek Carr is not a New Orleans Saint. I think, not only did Thomas play, what we're hearing is a pretty instrumental role in getting Carr to New Orleans, or at least recruiting Carr to New Orleans. The fact that Derek Carr is there caused Thomas to sit back and say, wait a minute, I'm willing to bet on myself. And once he and the Saints broke down that deal, and like you said, you're basically getting Michael Thomas for a $10 million deal. Mm-hmm. Which you look around the league and receivers, not even half of Thomas's abilities are getting paid almost double that. Mike's betting on himself. We don't know what exactly the incentives are, but you got to believe it has to do with playing time and production. So if Thomas plays well, plays a lot, he could get up to $15 million this year, and then cash out big time in next year's free agent market, whether it's with New Orleans or someone else. So I know people, it set the idiots on Facebook, especially, it set their heads on fire. Why would they bring back Thomas? Reason one, I just explained. Reason two, when Thomas is on the field, there's still nobody better at what he does than him.
Absolutely.
Reason three, without Michael Thomas, you look at this receiving corps. Olave is a budding star. Shaheed is a really good player, and I'm really excited to see his development. but neither of them can do what Michael Thomas can do. And what's that? Mike Thomas, when he's on the field, is a nearly unstoppable intermediate weapon, which is where Derek Carr likes to work the best. Mm-hmm. That crosses off what would have been just as big a need as defensive tackle and running back. A big physical receiver with sure hands and good route running ability. You guys can't find that every day. Not you look at the draft, there's not many of them. Not to check off all of those boxes. So again, Mike Thomas is betting on himself, but the New Orleans Saints took a wise deal for them and ultimately saved themselves about $15 million of cap space.
Yeah, I mean, this is, to me, the reaction to Michael Thomas is a little ridiculous because this contract really protects the Saints and puts all the onus on Thomas now.
Yeah.
If he ends up being injured the whole time and doesn't play, that's on him, not on the Saints. And
sorry to interrupt, and they'd still be paying him less than what they would have been if they cut him outright and he went and played for somebody else.
Exactly. I think people just wanted to, I don't know, I think they wanted to punish him. I get you get that feeling and this is another topic that I want to talk about a little bit, but you get that feeling from Saints fans that, if you are injured or get on that bad side, you're well paid and you're injured and unavailable, Saints fans really want to bury you. They really want to punish you because you are the symbol of their frustration if the team is not doing well. And I just don't understand that. And I feel that whenever you bring up guys like Michael Thomas, Jimmy Graham, Andres Pete, let me think of some of the other ones. Jarvis Bird is a totally different subject because Jarvis Bird never produced for us. Okay, so I'm totally discounting him and the Brandon Browner who deserve the hate. But I'm talking about guys that just, I don't know, as soon as they got paid and started and they got hurt, it's just the fan base turns against them in the worst way. Because I had this argument with a guy on Twitter about a week ago, and he was mad about the way the Saints do the salary cap, and they're always having to restructure and things like that. I want to talk about this clown in a minute too, the other clown. But this guy was really mad about this. He says the Saints never have cap room. He says, so we need to get rid of these expensive players so we have cap room. I said, so let me get this straight. You want cap room, so you don't want to pay the players you have, so you can spend a lot of money on players you don't have yet, and then you're going to complain about those players that you spent all that money on because they're eating all your cap, so you have to restructure deals. Is that how this works? Because where is this? I mean, they just think that there's just always going to be money. The teams that have lots of cap space don't have good players. Or if they have good players, they're rookies or they're working off of rookie deals, but they don't have enough good players. So it's mind-blowing, the logic behind this, but I know what it is. They want lots of cap room so they can do what the Falcons are doing today. Just start writing checks on day one, bringing in this guy, bringing in that guy. Doesn't matter if the guys are any good. I want them in. The Bengals just lost. They got plenty of cap space. They just lost their two starting safeties. Von Bell is one of them. He came back to the NFC South. What are they doing? They're talking about trading T. Higgins now too because they don't want to pay him. So are they saving all the money to go pay Burrow and Jamar Chase? Mixon's in trouble. Mixon's going to go to prison probably. His is a little more scary than Alvin Kamara's situation because
and not the first time he's done this either.
Yeah, right. He was in trouble in college too.
Twice.
So I mean, So they need a running back. when Cincinnati starts losing with Joe Burrow now, where's all the people going to be like, oh, yeah, this Cincinnati's doing it the right way. Cincinnati's got it all. I said, man, Cincinnati, they steered blindly into trees, and they finally figured out where the road was at one point. I mean, David Klingler, he just started going through they were the Bungles. I mean, come on. It's just, yeah, I've heard this. They're not going to trade Higgins, but don't put it past Mike Brown. Mike Brown doesn't pay people.
No, exactly.
Mike Brown used to have his scouts carpool to the combine. I mean, he wasn't putting money out to go fly. That's not how Mike Brown operates. That guy throws nickels around like manhole covers, as my grandfather used to say. He's still actually, my grandfather's favorite saying was, this is my mom's dad. His favorite saying was, he still has his first communion nickel. I mean, that's how cheap he is. Anyway,
and folks that are throwing a temper tantrum every single year, the Saints aren't spending money in free agency. Yeah, they are. They're just doing it to keep their own players in house. Guys, we've been down this road with these New Orleans Saints less than a decade ago, 2014, 2015. You mentioned Brandon Browner and Jarris Byrd, Ben Grubbs, Kobe Fleener. Those are just a few examples, of guys that were given big contracts to get here, and caused Saints fans, and we see it every NFL offseason. This team wins the offseason. That team's wins the offseason, with the exception of the Rams 2 years ago. What team that has ever won an offseason has even gone to a Super Bowl or had a glowingly winning record? The answer is a very, very short list. That strategy didn't work out for the Saints. Junior Galette. If you're talking in-house guys, that strategy didn't work out for the Saints. So Peyton, Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis, then said, okay, let's identify the young guys on our roster that we want to keep after we built through the draft. Spent selectively in free agency, Demario Davis, AJ Klein, guys that were going to play hard on a second contract, that weren't necessarily at the top of the star-studded names. That strategy worked out pretty good, I would say. Now you need to draft well to do it, and the Saints have been hit or miss in the draft the last couple of years. But you're still trending in the right direction if you build a team that way.
Chad doing his own electric company intro. For those of you under the age of 40, you have no idea what I'm talking about right there. Right. But that's and that's the electric company. Go YouTube that. Go Google that intro. So that's where I want to go to next. Okay, and like you said, it would be nuts too. It's like, the Saints don't spend any money in free agency, but they got all this money tied up in cap because they paid the guys already on the team. But then we didn't pay Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We didn't pay Marcus Williams. We paid Trey Anderson. So it's okay. How do you want to do this? There's only so much money to go around. And none of these guys, I always love this expression, they should take less money for the team. They're not going to do that. Are you going to take less money because you want to make sure that you've got other people working with you? No, you're not doing that. You're not going to take it. Let's just say you make $80,000 a year. You're not going to take $40,000 so we can have one other extra person making $40,000 so you don't have so much work to do. It doesn't work that way. You need that $80,000. You want more, in fact, because you got bills. Bitch, I need a new car. That's the way it works. Hey, I mean, that's this whole idea. We're going to take less money so we can help the team. The only thing they're going to do is they're going to take more money up front as a signing bonus and have Gail cut them a big check, and they'll allow a guy like Mickey Loomis or Kai Hartley to reduce the cap impact each year so you can stay under the cap. But you're not. The player's not taking less money. No one does that. They take a team-friendly deal, which means they're going to allow the deal to be structured in a way so it lowers the cap impact, but they're still taking a big chunk of change with them. I mean, that's just the reality. So over there on, I think it's FS1, I have no idea. It's all these stupid shows. I don't watch any of them because facts don't matter. It's feelings and hot takes, okay? But a guy named Nick Wright, who somebody called him Hans Loser, Hans Loser. And somebody else said he looks like a young Count Dooku in the Star Wars animated Clone Wars series. But I like Hans Loser. He went on a tantrum, and it started out with something that's totally factually incorrect, that the Saints have 20% plus of their salary cap tied up in dead money. Well, that's not even remotely true. And I called him out on it on Twitter. I said, explain to me how you come up with that number. And I showed him the sports, over the sport track or over the cap number where the amount of dead money is like $5 million. Mm-hmm. Now, it's increased since then because obviously since we lost Onyemata, that was a $10 million hit. But the point is, it's not 20% of the cap. At no point is this 20% of the cap or more. But he says this, and then he follows it up with the Saints run this Ponzi scheme with the cap, which is also ridiculous. Well, that caught Nick Underhill's attention. And Nick is at the point now where he doesn't want to ever have to discuss the cap again. If
I don't blame him.
The cap, subscribe to his website, subscribe to New Orleans Football, and you can watch the videos he's done and the articles he's published about how the cap works. But it doesn't discourage guys like Nick Wright from saying these stupid things. And basically it boils down to, damn it, I want the Saints to cut Lattimore. I want the Saints to cut Alvin Kamara. I want the Saints to cut Cam Jordan and cut Demario Davis so we can talk about them going to big market teams and getting teams like the Jets over the top and getting the Bills better so they can challenge the Chiefs. That's what they want to talk about. And the Saints keeping their players pisses them off. So they throw a tantrum. Is that how you see this too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm well aware of what Nick Wright said. The reason why I didn't chime in because I saw you going at him. I saw Underhill going at him. That thread was actually pretty entertaining.
It was. It really was.
But Nick Wright is just like Florio over at NBC and and a couple others. Florio and Wright are at the top of my own personal hit list. But they'll say these things that, like you said, are just factually delusional. Forget incorrect. Mm-hmm. They're factually delusional. And then when you call them out on it and you have the nerve to bring in facts, then they say, "Oh, yeah, you're just jealous that I'm pointing out inadequacies for your team." No, not at all. I'm pointing out fact, but they won't hear fact. A lot like some of the many of the fans in these Facebook groups. The reason why I didn't chime in against Nick Wright, and I've said a lot less about Florio, is I've come to the conclusion that these guys just thrive on attention, be it positive or negative. And I've got better things to do. I've got classier things to do. I've got more factual things to do than to entertain delusional trash like that. I suggest this to all of you. When it comes to Florio, Nick Wright, others, you hit the block button. You stop reading what they write. You stop watching the shows that they're on, and you stop engaging with them. I know it's easier said than done. And believe me, when Wright said what he said about the Saints media, the lack of intellect, among other things. Mm-hmm. I'm a member of the Saints media, so I really, really wanted to jump in. I'm like, no, because I mean, yeah, this guy, every time this guy opens his mouth, it proves my point and proves the point others, you, Underhill, and John Hendricks was into it with them. It proves what they're saying. And I let too many people get under my skin as it is. I'm not about to let, I'm not about to let the excrement of pond scum, get under my skin. But yeah, I'm well aware of what the bullshit he was trying to spew.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's when people are factually incorrect. I can deal with dumb opinions.
Sure, I debate. I'm all up for a debate.
Yeah, I can laugh at some dumb opinions. I can't tolerate factually or logically ignorant people who get paid to go out there. And I realize that part, like you said, part of their shtick is to get social media engagement, and it's saying outrageous things. The Lamar Jackson situation. It's like each person is trying to top themselves with something outrageous to say. And what drives me crazy about that is no one ever steps back and says, no, let me explain why some of these teams may not be interested in him because of this. And the fundamental thing is Baltimore is going to match whatever any team offers.
Oh, yeah.
So no team's going to do your homework for you. I mean, and that's really what you have to look at this. And I'm jumping way into a left field here, but that's the point. There's all this talk about collusion. There's talk about racism. They talk about, you name it. They just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And the reality is, almost every team in the league that would even be interested in Lamar Jackson knows they can't construct a deal that Baltimore is not going to match because Baltimore has no other options. So why am I going to do Biff's homework for him?
Mm-hmm.
And that's who Baltimore is. Baltimore is Biff.
Yeah.
Hello, think McFly, think. I got a time to recopy this. I mean, it's just that's what Baltimore is asking teams to do. Do my homework for me. Negotiate this deal for me, and all we have to do is look at it and go, got it. And we're going to make you wait also the full 7 days or whatever it is before they decide to match. I don't know, maybe, and this is something that, a lot of, this is where I get mad at the media too, because they don't educate people about, like Nick Underhill takes the time to talk to people about how the cap works. They don't educate them on what happens when you sign a guy to an offer sheet. It's almost like when you're buying a house, your bank account has to have a lot of cash in it. Mm-hmm. So you got to be able to cover this check that you're getting ready to write for a contract for Lamar Jackson. And it's almost get to freeze your assets right there. Don't spend any more money. You can't go and negotiate with other players to fill in other needs because you got to have that cash in hand for the full week. That's a big commitment for a team that probably has a lot of cap space and is going to be losing opportunities to get good players while they're waiting to see if they can get Lamar Jackson, which they aren't going to get him. They already know this. So that's the kind of stuff that these guys should be talking about in these shows, but they don't, because that kind of stuff doesn't generate, the clicks, doesn't generate the comments, doesn't generate the anger. They'd rather throw out the words like collusion.
Yeah.
Look at all the owners. They're colluding to prevent a black man from getting his money, which is absurd because who's a player that everyone's looking at right now as the contract they want to emulate? Deshaun Watson's. They want that guaranteed money Deshaun Watson's got. So it's ridiculous to say that. If teams knew they had a good shot, if Lamar Jackson was a free agent, just free and clear out there, he'd be gone already. He had been gone within 5 minutes of the tampering period. So all this talk about, oh, he's a running back, that's why they don't want him, because all he does is run. Oh, he's injured all the time. All that other stuff, that's just all smoke. It all fundamentally comes down to we're not doing Baltimore's homework for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
That is it. No, so I hope I answered your question, Brandon. I'm sorry I didn't click in this stuff. I really don't think he's going to go anywhere.
No.
Baltimore is in the driver's seat. That's the whole point of the tag by the players. Yeah, let him get his value, and the Ravens just sit back. Because, excuse me. I'm sorry. Why is it not showing? There we go. Yep. Absolutely, Brandon. Absolutely. That's what I was saying. All that stuff is why that's not happening. So earlier in the chat, someone asked, who can the Saints now sign in free agency to fill in this void while waiting for the draft? Because otherwise we're drafting defensive linemen in the first 3 picks that we have. Who can the Saints bring in?
And there's plenty of options. And I don't know if you were the one that asked the question. I know you posted on on Facebook because you and I have had some chats. Mm-hmm. I joked that about a week ago, Cam Jordan, who is almost as entertaining on Twitter as he is in person, he put out a mock draft of his own, and I swear to you, there were like 4, maybe even 5 defensive tackles in his mock draft. And as the news about Malcolm Roach came out yesterday, and Tuttle was signed, Onyemata was signed, I threw out Cam Jordan's mock draft is making a lot of sense. The Saints were never going to be active on the open market these first few days of free agency. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if they barely made any dent at all in the first week of free agency, because that's when all the money gets thrown around. John Butler, stop it.
I'm gonna belt you.
I know quite a few defensive tackles came off of the board yesterday, but there are also quite a few out there. There are, coming into Jordy Haltberg's show this afternoon, I said that there were 5 names that I was watching closely. There are now 4 because Larry Ogunjobi re-signed with the Steelers. But watch for Sean Robinson, Poona Ford, Greg Gaines, and a familiar name, Sheldon Rankins. Now, all those guys, they're all starting quality. Even Rankins, who's been nicked up the last few years. But they'll also, if the Saints ink any of them in the next 4 or 5 days, you're looking at probably an $8 to $10 million a year annual average. So other guys to keep an eye on. Jerry Tillery, Chris Wormley from the Steelers is a big interior guy. Quentin Jefferson, Taven Bryant. Those guys, they could go later in free agency at more of a bargain. But make no mistake, and I'm just focusing on defensive tackles because that's the area everybody's panicking in right now. But there are some big name running backs on the board as well. Some intriguing tight ends available if you want some depth around Jawan Johnson. So the Saints are going to make 2 or 3 signings before the draft. I'd be shocked if it was before Friday or the end of the weekend. They're going to address the defensive line period, but especially the defensive tackle position in the draft, because that's one of the areas where the depth of this draft looks strong. That's just, that's the way it's going to be. People get impatient every single year since 2016. Why is everybody else being signed, but the Saints aren't doing anything? Mm-hmm. That's not their style anymore. They've learned that lesson from Brandon Brown or Jarris Byrd, Kobe Fleener. They've learned that lesson, and they're not going to make those same mistakes. Calais Campbell. If Calais Campbell is available after the draft, he could be a New Orleans Saint. That's when the Saints like to strike too. They like
He's
to.
35 years old, so yeah, you have a good shot at getting him late. He's not the player he used to be.
Right.
Let me ask you this, since we've talked like Ashawn Robinson, somebody I'm really keeping my eye on. He's a limited player.
Yeah.
He's kind of become a journeyman in the NFL. But if you're looking for somebody who is about the equivalent of Shy Tuttle, Ashawn Robinson's about that at that level. A guy who can come in as a wave player and do something for you. He's not a mercenary like the Domino Sue or something like that. And you're not going to suddenly tap into that potential that he never showed anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But he is somebody you can bring in. Street. He's a lot like Street. He's somebody. It's somebody you can just kind of. He's young enough that you can kind of do something with him, but you're not going to overuse him. He's not your starter. So I'm watching him. I'd like to see Sheldon Rankins come back because I do miss Sheldon. He's not. Now I've got When Harry Met Sally playing in my head because I said that. But Sheldon, he's good for your accountant, but humping and pumping ain't Sheldon's strong suit. Anyway, I think these are guys you can bring in as starters, but you're bringing in draft picks that are going to supplant these guys really quick, and it keeps you from having to trade up and reaching for a guy early. Actually, what's going on with Carolina trading with the Bears, and we didn't talk about this because this happened after our show this week, but Carolina basically mortgaged their future to win now. And that's what you're seeing a lot of the stuff with the moves they're making. They're trying to put together a team to win now. And now there's some stuff about about Carolina wanting to trade back down out of the number 1 overall pick because there is some concern that there's not this is insane if this is true. They don't have a consensus on who they would want to pick of the quarterbacks, which is insane. If you're going to make that move and sacrifice as much as you did, you got to say, you know what? That's our guy, CJ Stroud. Or that's our guy, Bryce Young. But there's like a faction that wants Anthony Richardson, which I hope to God they do that.
Oh, I know.
I would love it. Because they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do Cam Newton all over again. So we're picking a guy who's less accomplished and more raw than Cam Newton was coming into the NFL. So please do that. Or Will Levis. We're gonna redo Kerry Collins, except without the arm hitch as he throws, but somebody who's a statue and doesn't have very good pocket awareness like Kerry Collins, and we're gonna get him. So. Yeah, those are the 2 guys I want in the draft. I really don't want them to draft CJ Stroud because he's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do Bryce Young because I think Bryce Young, he's short, but that's not the concerning part for Bryce Young. He is super skinny, and his frame doesn't it could handle a lot of muscle. He's not going to get much thicker than he is. Guys like Doug Flutie, Drew Brees, they were thick. They were bigger than their height. I mean, Drew Brees had huge hands. Drew Brees was solidly built, so he could take those hits. Kyler Murray is pretty close to the frame and size of Bryce Young, but Young is not as fast as Murray. So, I love the kid, but he would terrify me as my starting quarterback, especially when I'm drafting that high. And my understanding of the Indianapolis Colts had all but gone full Mike Ditka for him. They want Bryce Young to be their quarterback. But as a Saints fan, what you want to see happen is you want to see 5 or 6 quarterbacks go in the first 20 picks, because that means all the defensive players are dropping. And that's the best thing about it. And I want to see that. I want to see, the big three we just mentioned, Levis, Young, and Stroud go in the top 5. Then you have Anthony Richardson probably in the top 10. Then you probably, if you could see somebody pull Hooker into the top 20, that would be great news for the Saints. I know there's a lot of people who like Hooker. There's a lot of people who like Anthony Richardson. But if they can pull out 6 starting quarterbacks or 6 quarterbacks in that first round, that would be huge. And that helps a lot. That helps the Saints a lot with the missing pieces they have right now. Because now you're talking about at the end of round 1, you can get a defensive end. Maybe in early round 2, you're looking at, instead of a tight end, maybe you're looking at a defensive tackle right there. So you've got a new end and a new tackle, So it's a lot of optimism you should have about the draft, depending on how these things go. I want to ask you, the Giants put a franchise tag on their running back, Saquon Barkley. The Raiders put an exclusive franchise tag on Josh Jacobs. But the running back market doesn't look very good this year. I think a lot of teams were anticipating guys overpaying for running backs, and it's not happening. It's defensive tackles this year. Who are some of the running backs the Saints could look at, maybe in free agency, so they don't have to try and trade up for a Bijan Robinson or someone like that?
Well, first, I don't, unless Robinson falls to like the early to mid 20s, I don't think the Saints would trade up for him anyway. But I see your point. And I agree with you. I was surprised. I was surprised actually that 3 running backs got the franchise tag: Jacobs, Barkley, and Tony Pollard. It's not something you see in today's NFL.
No.
Then you saw Rashad Penny, sign with the Eagles today. The Broncos signed Perrine, a really good back from the Bengals. That's a good pickup for them. Someone pointed out, hit the news wires shortly before we officially went on air. David Montgomery went to the Lions. Boston Scott re-signed with the Eagles. So, but like you said, none of those are for big money. I haven't seen Montgomery's contract, but none of them are for big money. There's a lot of starting quality backs that are going to be available. Jamal Williams, who had a nice season for the Lions last year. You would think that the Lions aren't going to make a run to keep him, to re-sign him, since they just signed Montgomery. The Eagles, since they signed Penny, that probably leaves Miles Sanders on the market. Kareem Hunt has wanted out of Cleveland and more touches for 2 or 3 years now. Everybody, and I don't know why, but everybody is linking Alexander Madison, Dalvin Cook's backup in Minnesota, to the Saints. Madison is a good back. I wouldn't mind that. Thank you for the info, Matt. Madison is a good back. Another back out of Cleveland, and there just simply wasn't enough touches to go around for him. Dearness Jackson would be a sneaky good signing. Because remember, guys, you're not talking about. Obviously, we're going to be dealing with the Alvin Kamara suspension, but when Alvin Kamara is healthy, you're not talking about wanting or needing a number 1 back here. You're talking about a reliable complement who is going to be a legitimate threat in the backfield for defenses to deal with. So that way, you can give Kamara a breather, or you can bring Kamara out. Line them up a wide or out of the slot. So, Donta Freeman from Carolina, James Robinson from the Jets would be a good pickup. So, and all those guys are 27 years old or younger. So, please spare me the Leonard Fournette talk. Ain't gonna happen. Fournette was a good back, and in his prime, when he felt like playing, he'd be a great fit. but all those other guys would be better fits. And again, just like defensive tackle, the running back spot is a deep spot in this draft. Bijan's going to be the top back off the board. There's no question about that. Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama might sneak into late in the first round. It won't be New Orleans because New Orleans already has a better version of Gibbs and Alvin Kamara. But draft, you're talking Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, who I love. Israel Banakanda from Pitt, Spears from Tulane. You watch round 3 or round 4, Chase Brown from Illinois. You flip on his film and tell me he doesn't remind you of Mark Ingram in his prime. So I actually expect New Orleans to get a running back in free agency and the draft, but it won't be in round 1 of the draft.
Yeah, unless, like you said, unless you see Robinson really sliding, getting close to 20, then the Saints may pull the trigger and jump up there and get him.
And I'd support that.
Yeah, I think right now defensive tackle is a big need, and I'm watching a lot of defensive tackles in the draft. I think they have a good shot at getting a good one at 29. Hell, that Georgia tackle is sliding left and right. I don't know how that's going to play out by draft time.
Me either, but I mean, beyond him, there are 4 defensive tackles that I have first-round grades on. That I would love to see any of them in a New Orleans uniform.
My son Matt is huge on the Pitt guy. He likes him a lot.
I could see why, but I think New Orleans would need a big-bodied guy first. So I'm looking at Ika from Baylor. Or Mozzie Smith from Michigan, but if they drafted Cansey from Pitt, I wouldn't be at all upset.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're right, Matt. You're right. I forgot about it. James Cook, Dalvin Cook's little brother.
If you're talking about the Georgia back, you're talking about Kenny McIntosh, and he'll be a mid to late day 2 pick, maybe early day 3. If you already have your between the tackles thumper in free agency, then McIntosh would be a great pickup for a versatile back.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. I could have sworn I read somewhere that they were talking about Dalvin Cook possibly getting traded or released from the Vikings. I just can't see that because I don't think the Vikings are in a rebuild mode yet.
No.
Granted, it's a new coach, but they did get to the playoffs. He's not in the frame of mind. They're going to start jettisoning players to get his players in. But I read about Cook, and the other name that popped up as a possible trade bait I'm seeing is King Henry with Tennessee. Now Tennessee sounds like they're going for the full tank mode because they're talking about dumping all kinds of players. Derrick Henry, is that a guy that you would want to touch? I mean, I wouldn't trade for him because I think they're looking for high picks for him.
Yeah.
But Derrick Henry on this offense with an Alvin Kamara coming off of suspension and probably angry and wanting some playing time would be lethal.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Derrick Henry? Because I think Derrick Henry is a guy that I think he gets misused sometimes because you want to try and treat him like Campbell, and he's not Campbell. But I mean, how do you see Derrick Henry?
I don't know. And what I mean by that is this. You'll get the reference, Alan. I'm not certain younger Saints fans will. Would you be getting, and Derrick Henry, would you be getting a 1981 George Rogers, or would you be getting a 1985 Earl Campbell?
This is true.
And
this time get injured.
Yeah. And that kind of running back, when they fall off a cliff, it comes really quick. And Henry was still very good last year, but he looks not looks. I'm wondering because he's missing more and more time. Are those hits that he is dishing out? Are they starting to take a toll on his body? So because of that risk, if I'm the Saints, I don't pay out a lot of money. If he's cut.
Not my son, no, John. He wasn't.
I don't pay out a lot of money if he's cut, and I don't shell out anything higher than a 4th round pick, if he's available for trade. If he's good, my God, are you talking about an offense? Derek Carr might never have to throw more than 15 passes a game down the field. I mean, you got to use Kamara as a check down, but that Derrick Henry is a bad man. But I question how long was Derrick Henry going to be a bad man. So no, I don't take that risk.
I think of it for the more recent, and John, you ought to know, my son has seen Earl Campbell footage. He's seen George Rogers footage. You live in my household, you're gonna see some classic running back footage. You're gonna see Jim Brown footage, and Jim Brown is older. I wasn't even alive for Jim Brown when he was playing. When we're looking at, I look at 2 running backs for that are later generation backs, but Larry Johnson with the Kansas City Chiefs, and
that's a good one.
Jamal, oh hell, I can't believe I just forgot his last name. Dirty Bird from the Falcons, Jamal
Anderson.
Thank you. I kept wanting to say Brown, and I knew that wasn't right. Jamal Anderson. Deuce McAllister said this a long time ago. You only have so many carries in your body. After that, your body starts breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's funny. I did actually tell him that one time. We're watching ourselves some NFL films. I'm going to teach you about John Facenda. So, and I had the sounds of the NFL, the CD that came out in the 90s that you could play the NFL films music from Sam Spence. I had that on a CD, and I used to play that in the car a lot. So my son has heard it. And the Raiders theme song, But anyway, he said if you average about 300 carries a season, you can probably play for a good 7, 8 years. But if you hit, Deuce was saying that if you hit around 350, now you're pushing it. You're probably shortening the years. And Jamal Anderson and Larry Johnson both hit over 400 carries in a single season. And that's why their careers ended so quickly. And I think that's going to be the case for Derrick Henry. He's a big man, but he runs upright. He doesn't run with his shoulders down like Earl Campbell did. Now, Earl Campbell had 2 tree trunks for legs.
Yeah.
That and I'm not exaggerating. They are huge. If you see, and it's not a wide angle lens. If you see Earl Campbell's legs when he was playing in his prime with the Houston Oilers, the Love You Blue era, those thighs were massive. They're as big as Bryce Young's chest. I mean, that's how big his thighs are.
Maybe bigger.
Yeah. Mike Allstott's another one. Now, Mike Allstott, they used him as a fullback, so he didn't carry the ball nearly as much. But but Mike Allstott was the last guy who had the real good old school shoulder pads. I mean, that his head like the top of a mountain because his shoulder pads were so big. But you only have so many carries in your body. You can't take that kind of punishment. You can't take those hits. And running upright instead of dropping the shoulders and running over people with the chest part instead of this part here, that wears you out. Mm-hmm. And that's why people stop paying running backs. Deuce McAllister got his big contract. And then the next year, 2005, that season, the year he got paid, he blew out his knee. And then in 2007, he blew out the other knee. And then he was done by 2008. So it happens fast. Yeah, Todd Gurley. The Earl Campbell reference that Bob's making, it's on YouTube. It's Atlanta. It was this last home game of the 1985 season. Earl Campbell breaks open, wide open field, takes off running, and then he pulls his hamstring about the 20-yard line. And you see him grab his hamstring, and the safety for the Falcons catches up to him with something else that nobody ever used to do, punches the ball out, and the ball goes out of the end zone for a touchback, and that was the last carry of Earl Campbell's career. That's how his career ended. So, yeah, I wasn't at that game. I was in college back then, but I watched that game. And that was a painful game to watch because it's the Falcons. You hate losing to the Falcons. Like I said, during the season last year, we can go 2-7, 2-15. As long as those 2 wins are against the Falcons, I'm not that upset about the season. So, okay. So last thing, Jamal. You mentioned Juwan Johnson. Sorry, Juwan Johnson got his contract. The Raiders. Let me make sure I understand this right. The Raiders extended Waller, didn't they?
Last year, yeah.
Okay, they extended him last year, and this year they traded him. What the hell is going on around there? I mean, are they even thinking?
No, no, they're not. What the hell is going on? 2 words. Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
He destroyed the Denver Broncos franchise. He is in the process of doing the exact same thing with the Raiders. Yes. Don't get me wrong. I like Garoppolo as a quarterback, but you basically, and they got him for significantly cheaper than what they would have paid Carr this year. Mm-hmm. But you swapped out Derek Carr for the exact same guy, production and ability wise, who's injury prone. Mm-hmm. Then you give away his best receiver, his best intermediate receiver in Waller. You have no answer on the offensive line. You have no defense to speak of, and you're not making any moves to get defenders in. Just 2 words, Josh McDaniels. And now we're hearing very publicly that Hunter Renfrow is on the trading block. So again, they're going to bring Garoppolo in. They're giving away one of the best tight ends in the league, and they might give away the second best receiver on the roster and one of the better ones in the AFC. So the Raiders are absolutely clueless, and it starts with the head coach.
Yeah, well, sometimes it starts with the owner too.
Yeah.
Mark Davis I saw a meeting one time that Mark Davis looks like the kind of guy that got promised to go to McDonald's if he didn't shit his pants all day at school. I mean, with that haircut and the bag he's got on his shoulder and everything else. The Raiders, Mark Davis left Oakland, and my son just put it up here. Mark Davis left Oakland because he was supposed to get all this money from Vegas with his new stadium and everything else. And he's still cash poor. And I'm still trying to figure out this relationship. How is he related to Al Davis? I know he's his son, but is he his biological son, or is he an adopted kid? I don't know, and I haven't been curious enough to Wikipedia this or anything.
Not me either.
I mean, Al Davis did not look retarded. And I don't mean that to be ugly, because I know, Mark Davis is never going to be a guest on this show. But, I mean, he looks like he should be on the short bus. And it's that Dumb and Dumber haircut he's got. And I know that's what's ruining it for me, because I'm picturing, now I'm drawing a blank on so many names right now as I'm doing this show. But the character, not Owen, but the other Jim Carrey. He's got that Jim Carrey haircut. So it just, yeah. It's the Jim Carrey haircut where, you want to hear the most annoying sound in the world, and you're saying there might be a chance, that kind of thing, and that's what does it. So when I'm reading people bash the Saints for signing Derek Carr because they're like, well, he's basically a younger Andy Dalton, or is he, he's basically he's never won anything. And then they start putting up statistics like, okay, he's never played with a defense that's ranked higher than 25 or 28. He's got the most fourth quarter comeback in he's got though. Okay, it was a show. Okay, he is a son. It's just I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of things about Derek Carr where you feel like, no, he was on a train wreck of an organization with train wrecks for coaches. And this is kind of why I don't really hold Dennis Allen's Raiders record against him. A lot of people like to do that to try and diminish his coaching ability because they want somebody else as the head coach. And that's really what it boils down to. They just want someone else other than Dennis Allen. My thing is, you cannot count anything that anybody does with the Raiders right now as a fair assessment about how good or bad they really are, because the Raiders are just that dysfunctional. And they're not going to turn around anytime soon because they don't want to. It's something inherent in the culture, which is amazing, given how the Raiders were in the 60s and the 70s. It's amazing how dysfunctional this organization has been since I graduated high school, and that was in the mid 80s. It's just they have no comprehension of how to put an organization together, no comprehension of how to put a team together. So, I mean, it's like the Jets and the Raiders, who played in one of the most famous games in NFL history, the Heidi Bowl, but they're now two of the worst organizations in pro football. I wasn't going to get into it much, but look at the Jets right now, waiting on Aaron Rodgers, who is still a Packer, and he's telling them who you need to get before I come over there.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? I mean, Bob, how do you? I mean, people were talking about Aaron Rodgers earlier being a diva and everything. I mean, this is insane. How would you like to be the Jets?
I'd never like to be the Jets under any circumstances. I know I can't be the only one rooting for the Jets to be kissing Aaron Rodgers' sack 24/7 for 2 to 3 straight weeks. And then Aaron Rodgers either retires or says, no, I'm going to stay with the Packers. I was never going to leave here. I always loved Green Bay. Basically for Aaron Rodgers to be Aaron Rodgers. I know I can't be the only one rooting for that. But yeah, this is sickening. And yeah, if you're a Jets fan, you have to be sick to your stomach right now. Whether you get Aaron Rodgers or not, but especially if you don't. And if you do get Aaron Rodgers, well, be careful what you wish for. You should have probably watched the 2022 season to see how he performed. And B, the off the field stuff you're getting with Aaron Rodgers, it ain't going to be worth the headache. It's not. So, I mean, I am glad the New Orleans Saints never for a millisecond, in the last 2 to 3 years of the Aaron Rodgers soap opera, even entertained trying to get him out of Green Bay.
I'm wondering if he's going to do the whole Brett Favre tour. He goes to New York for a year, but his ultimate goal is to go play for the Vikings so he can play the Packers twice a year and punish the Packers. I mean, we're on the Aaron Rodgers watch, which is a lot like the Favre watch, except they're not forcing him to retire. You know, the only thing that's missing is the NFL Network camped outside Aaron Rodgers' home, reporting on what he's doing. Is he working out with high school kids right now? What is he doing? You know, because that's kind of where we are right now. And you know, John Butler asks, I'll be honest with you, I have not watched a single USFL or XFL game. I really, I can't. I just can't.
The USFL hasn't started their season yet. They do in April. Okay. And I actually plan to, there's going to be a series of 8 or 9 games in Canton. So I'm going to go up there and cover a few of them. Maybe because a few, at least half of them are going to be involving the New Orleans Breakers. And we provide light Breakers coverage with the Saints News Network. So I might go up there to cover some of that. But no, I have not watched an XFL game yet. And I feel a little bit bad because our friend Lyndon Stevens is playing for the Seattle franchise. And I'm really rooting for him. But I just, this time of year is bad. You know, I'm sick, as Alan pointed out earlier. But if you're covering an NFL team, be it on a podcast or with a news network, free agency and the draft is literally your busiest time of year. It's way busier than what you get during the regular season because you have to cover so many angles on literally a daily basis. So I feel bad, but no, I have not watched any XFL games either.
Yeah, I can't get into it. You know, part of the appeal of USFL was you had NFL caliber players on, you know, playing in that league. And I used to watch NFL Europe too, a long, long time ago. But that was because it was kind of a D league for the NFL. You had players, Jake Delhomme, for example, Kurt Warner, Leroy Glover, guys who were allocated to NFL Europe teams for developmental purposes. And, you know, I really miss that part of the league. I think the league should have a developmental league because, you know, going back to the draft, everybody's hyping up Anthony Richardson, but it reminds me a lot of the hype about Malik Willis. Imagine if we had a developmental league and you have a player like a Malik Willis. That guy needs, I'm sorry, Bob, I'm wrapping this up pretty quick, but I was going to say that guy needs to have that level of competition and the reps to see if he can improve. Because that's how a guy like Jake Delhomme ended up becoming a starter for Carolina. Yeah. Because he got the reps in NFL Europe.
And you harken back to the original USFL days, and I love that football, 83 through 85. But like you said about those players, you knew that they were NFL caliber players because they were being drafted by NFL teams, and outbid by the USFL or pulled off of NFL, starters that were pulled off of NFL rosters because they were given bigger contracts by the USFL. I honestly believe that if the USFL gets decent ratings for this second year, that will probably work out to be your minor leagues or NFL B league. The XFL seems determined to try to stand on their own 2 legs, and it's just this is what the third or fourth version of it. It's hard to believe that that's going to stand pat. But the USFL, with all the former NFL players and coaches coaching for them now, the USFL draft last year was basically a glorified version of the expansion drafts that new NFL teams used to have. The Texans, the Panthers, the Jaguars back in the day. Teams like that. So that's what made me start to believe that the USFL, if they get a year or 2 of decent ratings, that some kind of deal with the NFL will be worked out.
There's only 3 things I remember about the XFL, and it's probably the debut of the XFL. Instead of a kickoff, they had some kind of mad scramble for the football, like a rugby pile. I remember that. He Hate Me, that name on the back of his jersey. And Vaughn Dunbar finishes football career as a member of as an
That's right.
XFL team. I think it was in San Francisco. And I couldn't believe Vaughn Dunbar was out there playing. I think he injured his knee during the game I was watching too. So, which of course is a fitting end to his career. Last comment before we go for the night. Marcus Davenport is now a Viking. He's on a 1-year prove-it deal, much like Michael Thomas, actually, with the Minnesota Vikings. And people are having a discussion, is he now considered one of the biggest busts in recent Saints history? We have to throw out the Meekum years. So let's just say since 2000. Okay, so we can even leave Sean Knight out of this conversation. But since 2000, do you find him to be one of the biggest busts? I don't, but I'm curious your thoughts.
No, no, I don't either. First of all, in my opinion, to be a draft bust, you got to be, if not a first round pick, at least a second round pick, because with those come higher expectations.
Yeah.
And I realize why people view Marcus Davenport as a bust, because they traded up to get him. And they not only traded up to get him, but they bypassed perhaps a quarterback of the future, along with several other talented players when they picked him. But you can't make that comparison. The Saints drafted Davenport because he filled a major need for the team at the time, not only immediate need, but future need. I would say that Marcus Davenport is maybe one of the bigger disappointments of all time. And there is a big difference. I call him a disappointment because all that talent, and he does have a lot. He's a good kid. He's not a troublemaker or a cancer or anything like that. And you almost want to root for him. You definitely want to root for him if he's wearing your team's uniform. But as a person, you want to root for him because he is a good kid and he does have all that ability. But the injuries just held him back, and they stunted his development. He never showed a lot of growth on the field when he was able to play. So because of that combination, I'd label him as a disappointment. But at the same time, he produced at a decent level when on the field. He constantly drew double teams, which freed things up for guys like Cam Jordan, David Onyemata, Sheldon Rankins. So in that way, Davenport did do his job to an extent. And that's why I wouldn't label him as one of the biggest draft busts of even the last 20 years.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I mean, to me, a bust is Jonathan Sullivan.
Yeah.
And he was a bust.
Yeah. Stephon Anthony.
Yeah, Stephon Anthony. He's a bust. He cost you a productive tight end, and he was a bust first-round pick. You had better linebackers available that you could have taken instead of Stephon Anthony. To me, it's Stanley Jean-Baptiste. You want to do the second round. You talk about guys, to me, a bust is somebody who does absolutely nothing. I mean, doesn't even get starting jobs, gets benched. Jonathan Sullivan is a Meekum level bust. And that was Loomis's first draft.
Yeah.
The 2003 draft. And he traded 2 first-round picks. I think we had the 16th and 17th pick. Could have been the 17th and 18th. I don't remember. One was the Dolphins pick, one was our pick. Back to back. Packaged both of them, moved up to get him instead of Trufant, I think, was one of the cornerbacks that was available, and Troy Polamalu, the safety. Imagine having Troy Polamalu on the Saints, the Hazlitt Saints, instead of Tasaki Jones. You passed up 2 really good players to move up to get Sullivan, who did absolutely nothing for you. Davenport, like you said, when he played, he drew double teams. He did get sacks. He did create a lot of pressure, a lot of havoc. Teams were aware of him, and he freed up things. Sullivan did none of that.
No.
Sullivan's most famous play he was inactive, and that's where a guy like the defensive end of the Saints just drafted a couple years ago,
Peyton Turner.
Peyton Turner, yes. Peyton Turner's approaching Jonathan Sullivan territory. That could be a bust. Okay, he's always hurt, and he's even a healthy scratch. Those are bigger busts than Davenport. But Davenport's most famous play was he and Grady Jackson broke into the press box at the Superdome. They were both inactive for a game because of injuries. Broke into the press boxes, buffet-style food they had for all the media members for the game, and wiped that table out instead of being downstairs with the players. That's their most famous play. That's his most famous play as a Saint. I mean, what the hell? You know, that's Meekum era bust.
Yeah.
And John Meekum era bust, that's like picking Rick Middleton, linebacker, with his all-pro teammate, Randy Gradishar, still on the board, who had all the awards, All-American, top linebacker in the draft. We're going to pick the teammate. We're not going to pick him. The Denver Broncos, who picked next, say, thank you very much. We'll take him.
Yeah.
Plug him in for the next 10 years and be part of the Orange Crush and be in Super Bowl 11, even though they got their ass kicked. You know, I mean, still, you know, it's just that's really stupid. So, you know, that's the kind of bust Sullivan is. And I agree, Jimmy Gumbo, he's the biggest bust of the 21st century, bar none. Stanley John Baptiste, another big bust, never played.
Yeah.
You drafted him in second round baseball potential. Rick Leonard in the fourth round of 2018. You drafted him. He was rated a seventh round pick, borderline undrafted free agent. You took him in the fourth. I mean, that was horrible. That's. I think Mickey Loomis was drunk for that draft, or somebody was, because that 2018 draft was a horrible draft, and that's one of the reasons why the Saints didn't progress further than they should have, because those players that were taken in that draft just did not, and that was the last big draft they had, deep draft, because the other drafts since then were much smaller. They've had far fewer picks. But to me, that's the reason why you haven't seen younger guys stepping up to replace a Malcolm Jenkins, or a younger linebacker to step in to replace, they're not going to replace Demario Davis, but to back up Demario Davis, and why injuries are hurting this team as much as they are, because you're relying on your guys that you drafted in 2016, 2017 to still carry your team. So anyway, Bob, I don't know if you're going to make it tomorrow night. I've tried to talk more than you to try and save your voice a little bit, but what's coming up in the Bayou Blitz?
More free agent frenzy. Again, like Alan and I told you tonight, folks, I wouldn't expect any signings, off the open market by New Orleans. But Brendan and I are going to talk about potential signings, at different positions, a lot like we did tonight. Where do the Saints go from here? We'll poke a little bit of fun at the Carolina Saints and the Atlanta Saints too, for the moves that they're making. Tony Dunn, I'm sorry I didn't have the voice to pull double duty for you guys over at Cat Chronicles. I know I will be joining our sister podcast next week, but make sure you guys tune in for the Bayou Blitz tomorrow. I'm hoping Brendan can carry the show. I'll just be happy to live through the night. John Hendricks, Kyle Mosley took over the usual free agent duties that I would do over the last 36 hours or so, but I suppose I eventually got to become productive, from a writing aspect too. So we'll get back to the editorials and the breaking news stories at Saints News Network also.
Good deal. Well, like I said, it's tomorrow's the official first day, so I don't expect big stuff to happen. I expect more things. Probably towards the weekend, maybe Friday, you'll see some more names get moved around. But I think the Saints really start making moves next week.
Yeah.
They're going to kind of see how the market plays out, which is what they do, and make selective hits. I'm curious about Hunter Renfrow. I would not mind him coming over. I'm watching running backs carefully. I'm watching defensive linemen now carefully, defensive tackle especially, not so much defensive end. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, it's amazing. I was worried we were going to run out of content building up to free agency, and we sure as hell haven't. And, I expect it'll die down in the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to start really stressing for stuff. But in the meantime, buckle up, because this is what you want to see. This is what you know. Are you not entertained? To quote Gladiator. It's going to be a fun, exciting couple more weeks. So in the meantime, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Bob, for sticking out with us. And we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.